Milk is often the first thing on your grocery list, but I bet plenty of you know someone who doesn't use dairy. Dairy is in almost everything. It's one of our most readily available food sources. And while using a dairy alternative can be an inconvenience, it may also be a boost in your health. I'm here to suggest that Americans should eat less dairy. I work in a pharmacy, and so I see that a lot of patients get medicine for gastrointestinal health. And I personally notice the difference in myself when I cut out dairy. I feel a lot less stomach upset, and I don't have as much sinus congestion. Historically, humans and dairy have worked together for a long time, but there are a lot of negative health effects that some people experience, and there are plenty of dairy alternatives available. I honestly find it strange to talk about this topic because dairy is so common. It really is a key part of our food pyramid and our history. So I looked into why humans even drink milk. The BBC article, Why Humans Have Evolved to Drink Milk, explains that some countries relied on dairy more than others. In countries where it was more common to raise livestock in one place, it was convenient to eat dairy because it was just more available. This article also explains that historically we humans used milk as an easy source of fat, protein, and vitamins, as well as clean water. Although nowadays 75% of the world's population is lactose intolerant. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, in their informational handout, Lactose Intolerance, Information for Healthcare Providers, says that common symptoms of lactose intolerance are abdominal pain, diarrhea, flatulence, and bloating. More than 50% of Asians, African Americans, Native Americans, and Hispanic cultures experience lactose intolerance. And alternatively, only 2% of Europeans experience this. So as a society, we are no longer limited to what is most convenient. And since America is a melting pot, we should maybe consider dairy being a less common part of our diets because it doesn't fit with a lot of different cultures. A lot of dairy is also part of our diet, and while dairy is okay in small amounts, it's not good in the recommended amounts of our current food pyramid. So currently, the recommended amount is 3 cups a day, and I believe that is excessive. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine says that dairy is actually the #1 source of saturated fat. So some people may choose to eat unhealthy foods and justify it as a dairy, and that's why I think that 3 cups is a little bit much for a recommendation. We also add all sorts of sweet and savory flavors to our dairy products, and that really negates any of the vitamin and protein benefits we're getting. Another resource, Dr. Mark Hyman, in his article, Dairy, 6 Reasons You Should Avoid It at All Costs, actually proposes we cut out dairy altogether. I think this is a little extreme, and it may not be reasonable for our economy, but I want to share his expertise of why dairy is bad. Dr. Hyman says that countries with lower rates of dairy and calcium consumption have lower rates of osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is actually something that we recommend dairy for because of bone health in general. But if this is true, we should actually look into this more as a country because we don't want to negatively impact our elderly population. Research shows that higher intakes of both calcium and dairy increase a man's risk of prostate cancer by 30 to 50%. This is another quote by Dr. Hyman, and it worried me because any increase in cancer where our diet is really not as great as it should be is bad. So because of those facts, I think that we should consider dairy as a luxury, not as an expectation. There are plenty of alternatives, and those alternatives have additional health benefits of their own. I'm sure by now many of you have tried milk alternatives, maybe even a cheese alternative, and really any nutrients that we use dairy for, we can get from other foods. Milk alternatives are readily available and, to me, pretty tasty. There's soy, almond or nut, or coconut milk. These can be used in recipes or in your morning coffee, but make sure that you check how much added sugars there are, because there can be a lot of added sugar really to anything in your diet. Water is probably the most important alternative because we are made of so much water and we don't drink enough of it in general. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine noted that Canada actually recommended Canadians make water their drink of choice in just January of this year. We can also get any vitamins that we get from dairy easily, but that doesn't mean that it's the healthiest option. Any minerals found in dairy can be found in leafy greens or fruits, or in fortified grains like bread and cereal. These alternatives to milk also have vitamins that we don't receive from dairy, and there are plenty of recipes that are available because of the internet. When I'm on a budget, though, it is really hard for me to choose to buy these alternatives over easily available dairy. But if there was more of a demand, there would be less of a cost associated. Growing up, I ignored the symptoms of my lactose intolerance, and I was really embarrassed of my body because of it. If dairy alternatives were more common, I probably would have tried something else sooner and felt a little bit better. Dairy is a really big industry that's still growing, and to this day, it is still growing. I'm not saying that all dairy is bad, but I think that Americans should consider it less of a household staple. So we know that humans have been drinking dairy for a long time, and we know that there are some people whose diets suffer because it's so common. Luckily, there are plenty of replacements that we can choose to support. The food pyramid recommendation of 3 cups of milk is too much. I believe it should be reduced to 1 cup, and that dairy alternatives should be mentioned as well. If you don't believe me, try less dairy in your diet for just a week and see how you feel. If you notice a difference, spread the word. Thank you.